Welcome to the Relocated South African, a show for navigating immigration from South Africa for a better future. So today I'm joined by a special guest, Mariette Momberg. She lives in Dublin, Ireland, ex-South African, and she has made the move to live in Dublin. So Mariette, why don't you give us a short intro, what you do and how it came that you are living in Dublin at the moment?
Well, hi everyone. And I have moved to Dublin, what's it now, 5 years ago. I work in the investment industry, so I'm currently a relationship manager for an Irish asset manager with the name Irish Life Investment Managers. And I work in the pensions industry specifically. So just kind of how we got to this point and where we come from. So I do have an EU passport, which makes things slightly easier. Not going to lie with that one. But in 2019, my husband and I decided that we wanted to do something different. Both of us work in finance, and we just wanted to experience a bit of the world. We wanted to spend some more time traveling abroad. At that point, we didn't have any kids. And my brother lives in the US, and my brother-in-law lives in London. And we got to the point where we only saw them every couple of years. And we decided it would be nicer to be closer to them. So we went on a bit of a journey and a hunting excursion, if you want to call it that, in 2019, where we visited a couple of countries where we could see ourselves moving to. So we went to London, we came to Dublin, we went to Amsterdam, we went to Luxembourg, and we went to Budapest. And these are all really cities that we identified who at that point would have benefited from Brexit, and especially on the financial services side. And then we did a look-see and tried to see where we could see ourselves settling. And ultimately, the decision came down to really a lifestyle and culture similar to what South Africans would be. So enjoying a good old drink and some sport and some live music, along with the big one, which was the language. So made the decision easier.
Okay, obviously coming from the Southern Hemisphere, living in Europe, living in Ireland must have been quite a difficult decision.
It definitely was. And I guess, especially given where we were, we moved in 2020. So I think my first day working in Ireland was the 19th of March of 2020, which was the week that everyone started working from home. So I found myself in a foreign country, in a place where I don't really know anyone, with weather that is not exactly the same as the Southern Hemisphere, to say the least. So it was definitely difficult, but absolutely so worth it.
And what would you say at that time when you and your husband were considering moving? Did you ever think maybe we'll stay in South Africa, or were you pretty much set in your minds on leaving South Africa?
So at that point, I got to a point in my career where I had to make a decision to move either sideways. I work in a client-facing environment, and unfortunately, there was some legislation that prohibited me from working with certain types of clients within South Africa, and there was a cap on my career growth in the role that I was. So there was a point where we had to make a decision: am I moving sideways and tilting into something else, or am I staying what I wanted to do? And to do that, I had to leave the country. So that was one of the big drivers behind it as well. We did consider it. We always said, unfortunately, we wouldn't be comfortable raising children in South Africa. That was just our view of things at that point, which just made the decision a bit easier. And we couldn't see ourselves continuing there.
Yeah, and emotionally, how did you find from the decision to actually getting on a plane and leaving? Was that an emotional day, the day you got on the airplane and thinking that this is now kind of forever?
It was. It definitely is. But I think mine happened very quickly. So I moved to Ireland by myself at the beginning of 2020 to come and look for something. And then I found a job, and I had 10 days in South Africa to go pack up my house, get everything ready, and get on the plane and leave. So it was very quick, which made it slightly easier. I didn't have time to really contemplate the decision. But I think at that point, we already made the decision that we're moving. And the one thing I can definitely say is that you cannot live in two places at once. So, yes, it was an emotional decision, but that decision has been taken by that point, and we knew we were setting up our life somewhere else now.
But you weren't joined by your husband initially.
No, initially I wasn't. I was by myself for 6 months, and it wasn't supposed to be 6 months. It was supposed to be only a short one to get me settled and giving him time to sell his business. But unfortunately, COVID happened in between. So it was a 6 month period where before he could actually join me, which definitely was difficult. It's not an easy thing in a foreign country, and then made even more so by the fact that you're not allowed to get out of your house or meet people. So it was a taxing time, but we made it through that. So I guess we're up there making it through a number of things.
Well, that's quite an important thing during COVID, for people who are considering moving now. It's easier to build support structures in other countries, where during COVID, it must have been exceptionally difficult to keep your mind going and to keep positive.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, especially when you're coming to a country like Ireland, which is very family orientated, when we were allowed to spend time with other people, it was spent with family. And then you don't have family here. So, but what I can say about that though is once you get your people and you get your support structure, you get closer a lot quicker. Because for things where you would usually call up your family, like for example, my son ended in hospital, and there'll be a quick call to a grandmother or grandfather and say, "Come help us out." It had to be a friend who needed to help us out. So you build much closer, much stronger relationships a lot quicker than you would have in South Africa.
And now, 5 years on, would your support structure consist mostly of South Africans? Because I think that's a question that one gets asked often is, do South Africans hang together? Is that what you find?
So we came here not with the intention of building a South African network, just we didn't move here to be friends just with South Africans. I think as a result of the situation of COVID and Irish people sticking to their families, it did end up that our support structure is mostly South Africans. And those are the ones that we got close with very quickly. We're now at a point where it's starting to broaden out because we can socialize a bit more and meet people a bit more. And like I said, we have a child, so he goes to creche, and by the time he goes to school, you'll integrate a little bit more. But ultimately, as a result of what happened, we do have a big South African network, which is also good for people to understand where you're coming from and to not have to explain yourself the whole time.
And to laugh at your jokes, because I find that the foreigners don't appreciate our sense of humor all the time.
They don't appreciate our sense of humor, and they definitely do not appreciate the braai like we do. So for those two, we definitely get it done.
Even in Ireland, where you have to braai under an umbrella.
You know how many Irish people have had to explain to you that you do not put away your braai in a shed for winter. It can be used at other times during rainy season too.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Now, I think it's very interesting. I was listening to a conversation this morning where people were talking about living in America and Australia and so forth. And a lot of them are saying the same thing, that in the initial arrival, it's much better to have a South African support structure because South Africans also understand what you go through when you make a move like this. So I can understand that. In terms of if you have to now say to somebody considering making a move, what would your, let's say, one or two critical things in that decision process be?
I think it would be firstly, make the decision for yourself. Don't let someone else try and influence it. Make sure you're serious about your decision. And then it comes down to like I said earlier, you cannot live in two places. Once you've made the decision, you have to make it completely. Now, with that, I'm not saying you can never go back, but just you have to make that shift in your thinking that like Ireland is now my home. And linked to that, I only went back to South Africa again, probably as a result of COVID and just situation. Only at the end of 2023. So by that point, I was already living in Ireland for 3 years. And It was fantastic visiting South Africa, and it was lovely to see everyone again and to experience the country again. But at one point, I realized I want to go home now. And when said that, I knew I was referring to Ireland. So it's just really making that shift in your mind that you've made the decision and you commit to it completely. Otherwise, you'll always wonder what else, and you'll never be fully present.
I agree with you that I find that a very, very important issue that one's got to work through, because in my view, you can't move and look over your shoulder and say, oh, if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back. And obviously there are reasons to go back, but I think a lot of people have this idea in mind and then they're testing it the whole time to their memory of what South Africa was like and this and that was positive for them. And then they go back and then they get unhappy again, because I also know of a number of people who went back and they're back here again. On the other hand, I can fully understand where people still have parents who are dependent on them in South Africa. That happens a lot. I'm sure you see that a lot.
Yeah, we do see that a lot. A lot of people use the situation of earning euros to send money back if it's from a financial perspective, but it is tough. And our parents are getting older and people are getting sicker, and you would want to move it back. But I just always say, even if you just moved for 5 years, 7 years, whatever it might be, apart from the country not being the same place where you left, you're not the same person you were when you left. So thinking you can just integrate back to where you were, get back into the same group of friends, get back into the same activities, that definitely is not going to happen because you're not the same person either. And I think people also lose that track. But definitely it's hard. Your parents are getting older, they're getting ill. Distance sucks in certain situations. But I wouldn't use that as enough of a reason to move back.
Mm. I also think within a family, and there are parents that do not support or feel that the children have left them and leaving them to their own with their own issues and kind of putting subtle pressure, whereas others are saying, listen, it's your life, go and make the best of it. If you think you can do a better future there and for your children, then you must go. So every situation is kind of different. But I think within the family, you know, yourself and your husband and your child, you've got to be supporting each other, which is great because there are times when you're up and there are times when you're down. So it's very important to do that.
Yeah, and I think you just need to remind yourselves why you did that, why the decision has been taken. And my husband was on a trip to South Africa by himself last year, at the end of last year, to go to his best friend's wedding. And when he came back, I had to ask him the question. We need to check in. Are we still happy with the decision, or are you going to come back after a weekend of spending it just with friends, reliving a South African wedding and having a blast without your child with you? Did we still made the right decision? And he came back and he said, yes, we're still on this journey. We're still made the decision to leave. This is not our cue to go back.
Great. Yeah, I think that's very important. I mean, some of the other things that spring to mind for me is that a lot of people, when they immigrate, they think they're going to recreate their South African life. We found in Portugal, anecdotally, we thought that we should take our furniture with us to Europe. And my goodness, were we so wrong, because we were advised that, oh yeah, it's a good idea, take your furniture, you won't get the same quality. And what did we find? The European houses are too small for the South African furniture. So there's a lot of those kind of things, you know, that people can learn from, because, you know, there's a lot of advice out there. But I think a little thing like that is important. Other things that I think obviously are important, medical services, infrastructure, transport, that kind of thing. As South Africans, we're not used to using the train. But in Europe, it's very different.
It is very different. And I think with that, just do your homework. I mean, everywhere, it's not rosy. Everywhere's got their issues. For example, Ireland is going through a big housing shortage. Things are really expensive. So it's just do your homework properly and make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, like the medical, like all of that. But you cannot I always get so mad at people who get mad at the health service here, but they're comparing a public health service to what you would have gotten in South Africa after you paying 10,000 Rand a month for private medical. They're comparing those two, and you cannot compare that. And that's the thing. You need to leave your lifestyle. In Ireland, we also use the weather as an example, where South Africans tend to not go out when it rains. If you're in Ireland and you're not going out when it rains, you're going to be stuck inside for quite a bit of time. So even the kids at creche, like there's no bad weather. It's just bad gear that you have. So put on your rain jacket, put on your willies and get outside.
Oh, that's very true. Very good advice. And yeah, I think we often see, we living in Portugal, we see, for instance, often with English people that they try and create an English lifestyle here with English pubs and Irish pubs, and they love going to the pub and doing what they were doing in England. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's good to integrate in the society, to understand how it works and to try and be part of it, because otherwise they'll always just see you as an outsider.
No, definitely. And we actually have a rule generally when we travel in Europe or, well, the States or everywhere. Our rule is we do not go to the Irish pubs because it cannot create what we have here. It's not authentic. It's not the same. You need the terrible weather to be comfortable in an Irish pub. So we tend to avoid them. And it's exactly that, embracing the culture, being part of the community and getting stuck in. Like, we're now at the point where we're here 5 years and can naturalize. And people would say to me, but you already have an EU passport. Why would you naturalize and get your Irish passport? But it's more than just getting a passport. It's about integrating in the community. My son is going to school here. I would like to vote here. I would like to form part of where I am building my future. And that means that I get citizenship and then I can be a responsible citizen in that sense. So it's really getting yourself integrated in the society.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your little story. And I think it's great to have such a positive story. I think obviously there are downsides and difficult times. It's not all rosy. Believe me, making a move like this is not that simple, and it's filled with red tape and other things. But it's great to stay positive and not to look over your shoulder and say, I'm going back when it gets bad. Thank you so much for joining us, Mariette.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed hearing about our experience of relocating from South Africa, why not subscribe to the show so you can hear more from people who have left South Africa for a better future abroad. Thanks, and until next time.